I believe I was set on the road to good writing during my first year at Georgetown College. I had a young professor for English composition, whose name I still remember, so much angst did he bring to my freshman year. P.A. Orr was a Canadian and a damn hard grader, and he gave a writing assignment every blessed weekend. I was not accustomed to getting B-minuses that I received on my first two assignments. And as a consequence, every weekend of my first semester in college, I devoted many nervous hours to writing and rewriting the assignments that P.A. Orr had given me. I am grateful to this day. Time and sweat. To tell you the truth, I was never quite sure the game was worth the candle until I sat on the D.C. Circuit. After all, I thought, judges don't read your brief, or even lawyers your legal publications, to get an aesthetic high. They want information. And it does not make a heck of a lot of difference whether it is conveyed as gracefully as might be, so long as the point comes through. I knew judges, facile writers, who applied this sort of cost-benefit analysis to their opinions. The game is not worth the candle. I was disabused of that belief during a case that came before the D.C. Circuit during one of my first couple of years there, involving, as I recall, prescribed automobile emission standards. It was an appeal from an agency determination, one of those big administrative law cases the D.C. Circuit regularly gets. There were many amicus briefs, quite common in the Supreme Court, but fairly unusual in those days, at least, in the D.C. Circuit. And I was getting quite punchy, slogging through them, and frankly, absorbing less and less of what they said. Then, quite far along in the process, I picked up a brief that woke me up and grabbed my attention. So clear, so precise, so well organized, so elegantly expressed it was. Turn to the front cover, because I never look at the front cover to see who had written this. And, oh joy, I was delighted to see that talent and hard work pay off, because the author was one of the members of the bar whom I knew well and greatly respected for his writing ability and his dedication. Of course, it might be true that only judges who care about good writing are impressed by good writing, but I doubt it. That brief just leapt out of the back. Finally, I was going to tell a story, which doesn't have a whole lot to do with the rest, but it's such a good story, I told it. I was teaching in Galway this summer, and one of my first days there, the Chief Justice of Ireland was there and gave me a book about practice in Cork on what was called the Munster Circuit in the early years of the 20th century. It's a delightful book. One of the stories it tells has something to do with writing. It's a good practice to use good, hard, brief Anglo-Saxon words instead of Latinate puffery. And the story was told of this one barrister in Ireland who was a very boastful fellow, and he made a bet that he would argue an entire case using only one-syllable words. Well, one of the other barristers at the bar readily took the bet, because he knew that, of course, you begin your argument to the jury. Gentlemen of the jury. So, he thought he had a sure winner. So this barrister gets up and he says, "Now, you 12 good men and true." It's irrelevant to the list. Rather than making a last point, I wish to raise a departing question. A question that has long intrigued me. Is high intelligence a prerequisite for great legal writing. It is surely not a sufficient condition. When I made the Harvard Law Review many years ago, we used to refer to it as making the review, I remember being overawed at the raw brain power of the fellow students with whom I was now spending much of my life. I was not impressed by and large with their writing ability. I thought I could write rings around many people who were much smarter than I. But if high intelligence is not a sufficient condition, is it at least a necessary condition of great legal writing? You know, I think not. Unless you're evaluating legal writing in part by its content rather than exclusively by its form, which is, I think, what we're talking about. To be sure, much of what it takes for good legal writing can be learned, and the less than brilliant mind may take longer to master those elements, good grammar, good Latin, for example. But it is doable. There is, however, a certain quality possessed by the really great writer, legal or otherwise. It has nothing to do with brain power, and probably cannot be taught. The same phenomenon exists in other fields of human endeavor. The ability to speak foreign languages, for example, has nothing to do with IQ. Ask Henry Kissinger. And in the field of music, the other principal means of human communication, there's no reason to believe that Mozart was a genius in the ordinary sense of being brainy. He was a musical genius. I think there is writing genius as well, which consists primarily, I think, of the ability to place oneself in the shoes of one's audience, to assume only what they assume, to anticipate what they anticipate, to explain what they need explained, to think what they must be thinking, feel what they must be feeling. I do believe, however, that there is at least this connection between good writing and intellect. It is my experience that a careless, sloppy writer has a careless, sloppy mind. Thank you very much for